Welcome to Module 5. In this module, you'll find the first unit exam. This is going to be the first of 4 exams that you're going to have to take during the course. And so this is such a big deal. You're 1/4 of the way there, so congratulations for that. You all have put in amazing work in this unit so far, and I'm looking forward to seeing you prove it when you take the exam. In this video, I want to go over the exam and just kind of give you some details and some hints on how to best study for it. The exam's pretty straightforward. We have 135 points on the exam, and I've given you 75 minutes to take the exam. And so that should be plenty of time for you to get through it. Before you take the exam, make sure that you look over the general quiz instructions, and that's going to tell you something about the abbreviations that we're expecting you to type on the exam. It's going to really kind of help you think through the exam. And so also feel free to use that document as you take the exam. Feel free to keep it open as you're working through the exam to refer to as you're working through the material. On the exam, you're going to find the following. First and foremost, you're going to find vocabulary. We're going to have a number of Greek words that we're going to ask you to define. We might ask you for the gender of that word, but most of the time we're going to ask you for the English definition. Let me just encourage you, make sure that you know your vocabulary well. You should know these words cold. You should be able to make short work of this vocabulary section. You should consider this to be free points and not to eat into your time. If you're going to skimp on studying anything for this exam, let me encourage you, don't skimp on studying for the vocabulary. Besides the points that are available to you on the vocabulary section, by knowing the vocabulary, you're going to really be able to make short work of the translation section. So let me just encourage you, know your vocabulary, know it well. The second thing that we're going to give you is we're going to ask you to write out several declensional paradigms. And so make sure that you know the pattern words that you've learned so far. So if you remember those pattern words from Mounts chapter 7, section 11, I believe, logos, graphe, and ergon, as well as the article. So make sure that you know those pattern words, and then make sure that you know the various ways that that first declension is formed. So our valor alpha, which the pattern word is hora, the Caesax, which our pattern word is doxe, and then sum, and our pattern word for sum nouns is prophetes. And so all 3 of those types of verbs are going to follow that first declensional pattern. Valor alpha, if you've got a val or a rho at the end of the stem, you're going to have the alpha instead of the eta. Caesax, so if you have a sigma, zeta, or C at the end of the stem, you're going to have what I call that eta alpha shift in the singular. And then sum, that's if you have a sigma at the end of the lexical form, the omicron upsilon in the genitive form, and then a masculine, they're masculine nouns. The remainder of the paradigm is going to basically follow that regular first declensional pattern. So make sure that you know the article, and make sure that you know those pattern adjectives, agathos, which means good, and hagios. Now, the key with hagios is if we take off that omicron sigma, we get that val, and so hagios is going to follow that valor alpha pattern. And you won't see any Caesax adjectives. So when it comes to adjectives, that first declension will have the normal pattern that follows graphe, and the valor alpha pattern that follows hora. And then don't forget ami. Ami is that paradigm for I am, you are, he, she, it is, we are, y'all are, and they are. And so be able to write that out in that full paradigm out. Now we might ask you to write out a paradigm for a non-pattern word as well. And so if that comes up, what you'll have to do is you'll have to identify what declensional pattern it might follow. So is it masculine? If it's a masculine noun, it's going to follow logos. If it's neuter, it's going to follow ergon. If it's feminine, it's going to follow one of our first declensional patterns, valor alpha or Caesax. And then remember that there are some 2 termination adjectives like ionios. Now you remember with two termination adjectives, the feminine form is going to be identical to the masculine. So we might ask you to write out the feminine form, and if we do, and it's a two termination adjective, then you basically will need to write out the masculine form because the masculine and feminine forms are identical. Also, remember that when you're typing Greek, you'll need to include the breathing marks and the iota subscript. You'll find a breathing mark on every word that begins with a vowel or a rho. And you'll need to hear the word to know if it's a smooth breathing mark or a rough breathing mark. So you'll find a breathing mark on every word that begins with a vowel or a rho. You'll only find that breathing mark on the first syllable. So there's no need to put any breathing mark on the second or third syllable of a word. You're going to find the iota subscript on every dative singular form, whether it's masculine, feminine, or neuter. Now, we don't want you to include the accents. Don't even worry about memorizing them. We ask you to memorize enough already. Forgo learning the accents. The accents change depending on where the word ends and lands in the sentence, and so we don't want you to worry about learning the accent, and we definitely don't want you to learn the accents at the sacrificing actually learning the forms. And so we're not going to ask you to write out the accents, and if you write out the accents, the quiz and exam will actually count it wrong. And so just forgo learning those accents. Now in this module, I've included what I call a practice exam. And this will basically quiz you on the various paradigms that you're going to have to write out for this exam. And so you can take it as often as you like. There's no time limit, but just be mindful that if you can't get through the practice exam, you might want to hold up on taking the real thing. Make sure that you can get through the paradigms on that practice exam. Now, the third thing that you're going to find on this exam is parsing. Now, we're going to give you a particular word, and we're going to ask you to identify the various parts. So you're going to have to tell me the case, number, gender, the lexical form, and the lexical meaning. Now, remember that the lexical form for adjectives is going to be the nominative, singular, masculine form. So even if it's a feminine adjective, take off the ending and add the Omicron sigma that tells me that it's masculine. Also, remember that in the workbook exercises, Mounce asks for the inflected meaning. Now, for nouns and adjectives, it's difficult to give the inflected meaning. It's going to be a little bit more applicable when we get to verbs. And so the verb louer, for example, would be he looses. The inflected form would be he looses. But what we want you to give on the exam and quizzes is the lexical meaning. This is going to be the English meaning that's on the English side of your flashcard. This is basically vocab work. So don't worry about the inflected meaning. Give us the lexical meaning. Now, finally, the fourth thing that we're going to ask you for is we're going to have a few questions asking you to identify adjectival position of a few phrases. So we'll give you a phrase with an adjective in it, and we'll ask you to identify, is it first or second attributive? And remember, when we're dealing with attributive adjectives, the noun is going to give you an attribute of the noun. So, for example, the good word. And you'll need to distinguish first and second predicate. And remember, with predicate adjectives, the adjective is predicating something about the noun. So the word is good. Now you can distinguish attributive and predicate adjectives by looking at the article. Usually attributive adjectives are going to have the article attached to the adjective. Predicate adjectives will not. And so they'll be what we call anarthrous. And then to determine the position, is it first attributive or first predicate versus second attributive and second predicate, you look at the position of the adjective. Is the adjective first? If it's before the noun, then it's first. If it's after the noun, then it's second. So is it in the first position or the second position? And then finally, we have one short sentence for you to translate. And so remember, with the translation, look at the various parts of the Greek sentence and identify them, and then put them in good English word order. And a hint for this exam, make sure that you pay attention to the punctuation. Now, besides the workbook exercises, we have one other assignment in Module 5 that's a little out of the ordinary. It's the oral recitation. And so what we want you to do is we want you to record yourself reading a single verse from the Greek Bible in Greek, and we've specified the verse and the assignment on the Canvas page. You don't need to do this as a part of the exam. In the past, we actually had students called during the exam to read the verse, so you don't have to do that. Just record yourself reciting the verse and uploading it. And make sure that you practice reading before you record yourself, and you can probably find a good recording on YouTube or in Logos. And so one tip that I'll give you, watch out for the Omicron. Several students want to read that as a long O sound. So, for example, they'll say logos, but it should be a short O sound. So, lagos, that ah sound, so lagos. So, one tip for you as you think about reading that verse. That's it. I'll be praying for you as you study for the exam, as you work through the exam, and I'm looking forward to seeing how you all do. I hope you guys have a great day.